In this video, we delve into the ramifications of former President Trump's decision to abandon the UN climate pledge and withdraw from the Paris Agreement, marking a pivotal moment in U.S. environmental policy. We'll explore the controversial arguments behind this withdrawal, the isolation it brought upon America on the global stage, and how world leaders continued their climate efforts without U.S. participation. As we examine the consequences for climate research, environmental progress, and the backlash from businesses, we'll paint a full picture of how this decision impacted the landscape of global climate diplomacy, and what the future holds with the new Biden administration. Join us as we analyze the profound effects of making the USA global outcast in the fight against climate change. 1. The unprecedented withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. In a move that shocked the international community, President Donald Trump announced the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement, a global accord aimed at combating climate change. This decision made the U.S. the only country to reject the widely supported Climate Pact, isolating it from the rest of the world. The Paris Agreement, signed by 195 countries in 2015, was a landmark in the fight against climate change. It aimed to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. By abandoning the agreement, the U.S. not only turned its back on a collective effort to address climate change but also abandoned its leadership role in this crucial global issue. 2. Arguments for withdrawal. Protecting American interests? The Trump administration justified the withdrawal by arguing that the Paris Agreement was unfair to American businesses and workers. They claimed that the deal imposed an undue economic burden on the U.S. while allowing countries like China and India to continue increasing their emissions. Trump argued that the agreement threatened to undermine American sovereignty and competitiveness, resulting in job losses and higher energy costs. However, critics countered these claims, stating that the agreement was flexible and designed to accommodate the economic circumstances of each country, including the U.S. They argued that withdrawing from the pact would harm, rather than help, the long-term economic interests of the U.S. 3. Isolation on the global stage. By withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, the U.S. damaged its credibility in climate negotiations and isolated itself from key allies like the European Union and Canada. These allies had been eager to work with the U.S. to strengthen the global response to climate change. The withdrawal created a diplomatic rift, weakening alliances and diminishing the U.S.'s influence on the global stage. As countries around the world continued to strengthen their commitments to reducing emissions, the U.S. found itself sidelined in discussions that shaped the future of global climate policy. 4. Global leaders forge ahead without the U.S. While the Trump administration focused on deregulation and rolling back environmental protections, countries like China and the European Union increased their investments in renewable energy. China, for instance, became a world leader in solar panel production and installation. The EU, meanwhile, committed to becoming the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. This shift in leadership left the U.S. trailing behind in the renewable energy race. As other nations moved forward, the U.S. risked losing its competitive edge in the emerging green economy, a sector expected to generate significant economic growth and job opportunities in the coming decades. 5. Impact on climate research and scientific progress. Another significant consequence of the Trump administration's climate policy was the slashing of funding for climate research. This reduction in funding impacted scientific advancements and hindered efforts to understand and mitigate climate change. Research institutions and scientists faced budget cuts, limiting their ability to conduct vital studies and develop innovative solutions. The lack of support for climate research also sent a discouraging message to young scientists and students, potentially deterring future talent from entering the field. This short-sighted approach undermined the U.S.'s long-term ability to address climate change effectively. 6. Loss of leadership in global climate diplomacy. The U.S.'s withdrawal from the Paris Agreement signaled a loss of leadership in global climate diplomacy, shifting influence to Europe and developing nations. As the U.S. stepped back, countries like France and Germany took on more prominent roles in climate negotiations. Developing nations, often the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, also became more vocal and influential in shaping global climate policy. This power shift underscored the growing importance of international cooperation in addressing climate change and highlighted the US's diminishing role in shaping the global agenda. 7. States and cities take a stand. Despite the Trump administration's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, several U.S. states and cities pledged to uphold the accord independently. Governors and mayors from across the country joined the "We Are Still In" coalition, committing to reducing emissions and investing in renewable energy. These subnational efforts demonstrated the resilience and determination of local leaders to address climate change, even in the absence of federal support. By taking action at the state and local levels, these leaders kept the spirit of the Paris Agreement alive in the U.S., ensuring that progress towards climate goals continued. 8. Reversing environmental progress. The rollback of climate regulations under the Trump administration led to increased emissions from industries, reversing progress made in previous years. Deregulation efforts targeted environmental protections, such as emission standards for vehicles and power plants, allowing for increased pollution. This reversal of progress threatened to exacerbate the impacts of climate change, including more frequent and severe weather events, rising sea levels, and loss of biodiversity. Environmental advocates warned that these setbacks would have long-lasting consequences for both the environment and public health. 9. Backlash from businesses and investors. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement faced criticism from businesses and investors who warned that the U.S. was falling behind in the global green economy. Companies and investors recognized the economic potential of renewable energy and sustainable practices, and many had already begun transitioning to greener operations. By abandoning the Climate Pact, the U.S. risked losing its competitive advantage and missing out on opportunities for innovation and growth. Business leaders called for a renewed commitment to climate action, emphasizing that sustainability was not only an environmental imperative but also a smart business strategy. 10. A new chapter with the Biden administration. In early 2021, the Biden administration reversed Trump's decision and rejoined the Paris Agreement, restoring U.S. climate commitments. This move signaled a renewed focus on addressing climate change and re-establishing the U.S. as a leader in global climate diplomacy. The administration pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions, invest in clean energy, and work with international partners to combat climate change. By rejoining the agreement, the U.S. aimed to rebuild trust with its allies and demonstrate its commitment to a sustainable future. The decision marked a new chapter in the U.S.'s approach to climate policy, emphasizing the importance of collective action and international cooperation.